Silence changes people in ways that words never can. The greatest turning points in life are often invisible. There is no dramatic goodbye, no loud argument, no final warning that everyone notices. Instead, a quiet shift begins deep inside someone who has spent years giving more than they received. At first, nothing seems different. They still smile, they still listen, they still forgive, they still make room for everyone else's feelings. But beneath that calm surface, something is slowly changing. Every disappointment leaves a mark. Every broken promise removes another layer of hope. Every moment of feeling unseen teaches a lesson that cannot be unlearned. Then one day, the people who always believed they would have unlimited access to that person's heart discover a truth they never expected. The door they thought would always remain open is no longer there. The person they once reached so easily has become emotionally out of reach. This is one of the most misunderstood transformations in human psychology, and it happens far more often than most people realize. Many believe people become distant because they stop caring. That explanation sounds simple, but real psychology tells a very different story. People rarely wake up one morning and decide to disconnect from those they once loved. Emotional distance is usually the final result of a long process that unfolds quietly over months or even years. Research in psychology shows that repeated emotional stress changes the way people think, feel, and respond to relationships. The brain constantly learns from experience. When kindness is repeatedly ignored, when patience is repeatedly tested, and when someone's emotional effort is constantly taken for granted, the mind begins searching for a safer way to protect itself. That protection does not always appear as anger. In fact, the healthiest form of protection is often the calmest. It looks like fewer explanations, fewer arguments, less chasing, less convincing. From the outside, it may seem like the person suddenly changed. But the truth is that the change began long before anyone noticed. It simply reached the point where it could no longer remain hidden. The people around them are often the last to understand what happened. They remember the version of someone who always answered every message, always offered another chance, always believed things could improve. They assume that version will exist forever because it has existed for so long. Human beings naturally become comfortable with consistency. When someone is endlessly patient, others begin expecting patience instead of appreciating it. When someone always forgives, forgiveness starts feeling automatic instead of valuable. Without realizing it, people begin treating extraordinary kindness as though it were ordinary. This quiet psychological habit changes the way relationships develop. Gratitude slowly disappears, respect slowly weakens, effort becomes one-sided. The caring person continues giving, while everyone else becomes increasingly comfortable receiving. Few recognize this pattern while it is happening, because it develops so gradually. By the time its effects become visible, the relationship has already changed in ways that are difficult to reverse. What makes this transformation so fascinating is that it almost never begins with one major betrayal. Movies often convince us that life changes because of one unforgettable moment, but real life is usually far more subtle. The strongest emotional walls are built from countless small experiences that seem insignificant on their own. A promise that was forgotten, a conversation that ended without being heard, a sacrifice that went unnoticed, a moment when support was needed but never arrived. One disappointment may be easy to forgive. 100 disappointments quietly reshape the way someone sees the world. The human brain remembers emotional patterns more than isolated events. It begins recognizing which relationships bring peace and which ones constantly create exhaustion. Eventually, protecting emotional energy becomes more important than protecting someone else's comfort. That is the point where everything starts changing. Perhaps the most surprising part is that becoming unreachable is not an act of revenge. It is not about making someone suffer. It is not about proving a point or winning an emotional battle. True emotional growth rarely seeks revenge because revenge still keeps people emotionally connected to the past. Becoming unreachable means something entirely different. It means discovering that peace has greater value than constant conflict. It means realizing that silence often communicates more than endless explanations. It means understanding that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your thoughts, your time, or your emotional energy. This is one of the greatest signs of maturity. Yet it is also one of the least understood. Many mistake healthy boundaries for coldness because they have grown accustomed to unlimited access. When those boundaries finally appear, they feel like rejection, even though they are simply expressions of self-respect. Throughout this video, we will uncover the hidden psychological journey that leads to this powerful transformation. You will discover why patient people are often misunderstood until they finally walk away. You will learn why repeated emotional imbalance changes the brain in ways most people never notice. We will explore the silent habits that slowly replace people pleasing with confidence, and explain why those who once ignored your value often become the first to notice your absence. You will also learn why emotional independence is one of the strongest forms of personal power, why silence can become more meaningful than words, and why the people who expected to reach you forever are often left searching for someone who no longer exists. Along the way, we will uncover several psychological truths that rarely receive attention, but explain why this transformation feels so unexpected to everyone except the person living through it. The final part of this journey may completely change the way you think about relationships. There is one psychological shift that separates temporary distance from permanent transformation. Most people never recognize it until it has already happened, and once it does, returning to the old version of yourself becomes almost impossible. Understanding this final lesson can help you recognize the difference between emotional withdrawal and genuine personal growth. It also explains why some relationships can recover, while others quietly come to an end without another word ever being spoken. That final insight brings together everything you will learn today, and it reveals why the strongest people are not always the loudest, but often the ones who have learned when silence protects their peace better than another conversation ever could. So stay with us until the very end, because every part of this journey builds on the one before it, and the final lesson may help you understand not only the people around you, but also yourself in a completely different way. If you enjoy exploring psychology, emotional intelligence, human behavior, and the hidden patterns that shape our relationships, you are in the right place. Welcome to the channel. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our future videos, because every episode is designed to help you understand the mind, protect your peace, and grow stronger with every lesson. Now, let's begin with the first reason they never expected you to become someone they could no longer reach. Patience is one of the most beautiful qualities a person can have, but it also carries a hidden danger that few people recognize until it is too late. When someone is consistently kind, forgiving, and emotionally available, the people around them slowly stop seeing those qualities as gifts. Instead, they begin treating them as permanent parts of that person's identity. This happens because of a psychological process often called the normalization effect. The human brain is designed to adapt to repeated experiences. What once felt special gradually starts feeling ordinary, simply because it happens again and again. Think about how people stop noticing the sound of a clock after sitting in the same room for a while. The sound has not disappeared. The brain has simply decided it no longer deserves attention. Relationships often follow the same pattern. The first time someone forgives a mistake, it feels meaningful. The second time, it brings relief. After the 10th time, forgiveness begins to feel expected. What was once appreciated slowly becomes assumed. Without realizing it, people stop asking themselves whether they deserve another chance, because they have grown comfortable believing another chance will always come. That quiet assumption changes everything. If someone always answers the phone, people stop wondering whether they are interrupting. If someone always makes peace after an argument, others stop feeling responsible for fixing the relationship. If someone always returns after walking away, the fear of losing them slowly disappears. This is not always done with bad intentions. In many cases, it happens automatically because the brain naturally predicts tomorrow based on yesterday. Consistency creates expectation, and expectation slowly replaces appreciation. The patient person rarely notices this change in the beginning because they continue acting from compassion rather than calculation. They believe understanding another person's struggles is an act of love. They tell themselves that everyone makes mistakes. They convince themselves that kindness is stronger than resentment. Those beliefs are admirable, but when kindness flows in only one direction, it quietly creates an unhealthy balance. One person keeps investing emotional energy, while the other becomes increasingly comfortable receiving it. The relationship no longer feels like two people supporting each other. It becomes one person carrying emotional weight that should have been shared all along. Over time, the patient individual begins noticing a painful pattern. Their understanding is expected but rarely returned. Their forgiveness is welcomed but seldom earned. Their effort is accepted but almost never matched. The realization does not arrive through one dramatic moment. It appears during ordinary days. It appears after another promise is forgotten without apology. It appears after another conversation where they listen for hours, but no one asks how they are feeling. It appears after another sacrifice passes unnoticed, because everyone assumes they will continue giving anyway. These small experiences begin connecting in the mind like pieces of a puzzle. Suddenly, events that once seemed unrelated reveal a larger picture. The problem was never one mistake. The problem was the pattern. Once the brain recognizes a repeating pattern, it becomes difficult to ignore it. This awareness changes behavior, but not in loud or obvious ways. The patient person does not wake up angry. They do not suddenly become cold. Instead, they begin making tiny adjustments that outsiders barely notice. They respond a little slower. They stop volunteering to solve every problem. They become more comfortable saying no without feeling guilty. They observe more and explain less. They no longer rush to repair every disagreement because they begin wondering why they are always the one responsible for repairing it. To everyone else, these changes seem unexpected. They ask what happened. They wonder why someone who was always available has become distant. Yet the real question is not why they changed. The real question is why nobody noticed the countless reasons that slowly pushed them toward change. Growth often begins in silence, long before it becomes visible to others. This quiet transformation continues because every disappointment leaves behind something invisible. Most people think life changes through one unforgettable event, but psychology paints a different picture. Human beings are shaped by accumulation. One difficult conversation rarely destroys trust. One forgotten birthday rarely ends a relationship. One broken promise rarely changes the way someone sees another person forever. But when those moments repeat over months and years, they begin creating emotional weight that the mind can no longer ignore. Stress psychology explains that repeated emotional strain affects the brain differently than isolated experiences. The nervous system pays attention to patterns because patterns help predict future safety. If disappointment becomes predictable, the brain slowly stops expecting comfort from the relationship. Instead, it begins preparing for emotional pain before it even arrives. This process happens so gradually that many people never realize it is taking place. Every time someone's feelings are dismissed, a little confidence disappears. Every time their effort is ignored, a little motivation fades. Every time they are interrupted before finishing their thoughts, a little emotional openness closes. Every time they apologize simply to restore peace while the other person accepts no responsibility, another small piece of trust quietly breaks away. None of these moments seem powerful enough to change a life by themselves. Yet together they reshape the emotional landscape of the relationship. The caring person starts carrying invisible questions everywhere they go. Will I be heard this time? Will my needs matter today? Will this promise actually be kept? Those questions consume emotional energy long before another disappointment even happens. Eventually, exhaustion replaces hope. They realize they have become the emotional manager of the relationship. They remember birthdays, solve conflicts, initiate conversations, offer reassurance, calm fears, forgive mistakes, and encourage growth while quietly neglecting their own emotional needs. This imbalance slowly teaches them a painful lesson. Caring for everyone else does not guarantee that someone will care for them with the same consistency. Once this lesson settles into the mind, emotional availability begins shrinking. They still care, but they become more careful about where that care is invested. They still love, but they stop believing love alone can repair relationships lacking mutual effort. By the time others notice that conversations have become shorter or invitations are politely declined, the emotional journey has already lasted years. They are witnessing the final stage of a process that started long ago, with moments they considered too small to matter. As emotional exhaustion grows, another powerful change begins to take shape. The person who once explained everything slowly discovers that explanations no longer create understanding. At first, they believe every misunderstanding can be solved through honest communication. They choose patience over anger. They repeat themselves because they hope clearer words will finally make someone understand their feelings. They give examples. They stay calm. They avoid blame. They explain their intentions again and again because they genuinely believe the relationship is worth saving. This effort comes from a good place, but eventually reality teaches a difficult truth. Communication only works when both people are equally willing to listen. If one person keeps explaining while the other keeps dismissing, forgetting, minimizing, or ignoring those explanations, words slowly lose their purpose. The caring person begins recognizing that the same conversations are happening over and over, with different dates but identical outcomes. Nothing truly changes. The promises sound familiar. The apologies become predictable. The cycle repeats. Psychology suggests that repeated emotional invalidation creates a sense of learned exhaustion. The mind stops investing energy into actions that consistently produce disappointment. This is not weakness. It is adaptation. The brain naturally conserves emotional energy when experience proves that more effort brings no better result. That is why silence eventually becomes more powerful than another conversation. It is not used to punish anyone. It is not chosen to create guilt or fear. It becomes a form of protection. Instead of explaining every feeling, they quietly observe actions. Instead of arguing over respect, they notice who naturally gives it. Instead of convincing people to value them, they begin placing their energy where value already exists. Their silence is often misunderstood because people mistake the absence of words for the absence of emotion. In reality, silence often appears after emotions have been expressed so many times that nothing meaningful remains to be said. The loudest battles have already happened inside their own heart. The decision to stop explaining is rarely impulsive. It is the result of realizing that genuine care listens the first time. Those who truly value the relationship do not require endless reminders about basic respect, honesty, or consideration. The moment this understanding becomes clear, the relationship enters a completely different stage, one where actions begin speaking louder than promises, and where the person who once chased understanding quietly starts protecting the peace they worked so hard to find. One of the biggest changes in a person's life begins the moment they stop measuring their value through someone else's approval. For a long time, many caring people unknowingly depend on external validation. They feel successful when others appreciate them. They feel secure when others approve of their choices. They feel worthy when their kindness is recognized and returned. There is nothing unusual about this, because every human being wants acceptance. From childhood, people learn to seek praise, encouragement, and belonging. The problem begins when approval becomes the foundation of self-worth, instead of simply being a pleasant experience. A person who depends on validation slowly starts adjusting their behavior to keep everyone comfortable. They say yes when they want to say no. They hide disappointment because they fear conflict. They apologize even when they have done nothing wrong. They spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to maintain everyone's positive opinion. At first, this seems like kindness, but over time it becomes emotional dependence. Their happiness rises and falls according to how others respond. One compliment can brighten an entire day. One criticism can destroy their confidence. This gives other people more influence over their emotions than they should ever have. Eventually, however, something changes. After enough disappointments, they begin asking a simple question. What happens if I stop trying to convince everyone to understand me? That question marks the beginning of emotional independence. Instead of constantly looking outward for reassurance, they begin looking inward. Their confidence no longer depends on applause. Their peace no longer depends on agreement. Their decisions are guided by personal values instead of public approval. This transformation is surprisingly quiet. Truly confident people rarely feel the need to announce their growth. They stop defending every decision because they no longer believe every decision requires permission. They stop explaining themselves to people who have already decided not to understand. They stop chasing conversations that repeatedly leave them emotionally drained. They begin trusting their own judgment after years of doubting it. This kind of confidence is different from arrogance. Arrogance demands attention. Quiet confidence simply moves forward. Ironically, this is often the exact moment when people who once ignored them suddenly become interested again. Human psychology is full of strange contradictions. Many people fail to appreciate what they can easily influence, but the moment that influence disappears, curiosity suddenly appears in its place. Questions begin arriving. Why have they changed? Why do they seem different? Why are they no longer reacting the same way? The answer is simple. They are no longer trying to earn acceptance from people who never intended to give it freely. Their emotional center has shifted inward, and that makes them feel completely different to everyone around them. The attention they once desperately wanted now arrives at the very moment they no longer need it. As emotional independence grows stronger, another major shift quietly takes place. Other people slowly lose control over their emotional reactions. Many relationships are built upon predictable patterns without either person realizing it. One person knows exactly which words create guilt. Another knows exactly how to trigger fear. Someone else understands how to make another person feel responsible for every problem that appears. These emotional patterns become habits. They repeat so often that everyone involved begins expecting them. If one person always apologizes first, the other expects another apology. If someone always feels guilty after setting a boundary, others learn to use guilt as a tool. If someone constantly sacrifices their own needs to keep peace, people become comfortable, expecting endless sacrifice. These predictable reactions quietly give emotional power to the wrong people. Emotional regulation changes everything because it interrupts those familiar patterns. Instead of reacting immediately, the healthier person begins responding thoughtfully. Instead of allowing guilt to control every decision, they pause and ask whether the guilt is actually justified. Instead of becoming afraid every time someone threatens distance, disappointment, or criticism, they recognize those emotions without allowing them to dictate their behavior. Psychology explains that emotional regulation strengthens the connection between thoughtful decision-making and emotional awareness. This means feelings are acknowledged, but no longer allowed to control every action. The result is dramatic. Manipulation slowly loses its effectiveness. The same comments that once caused panic now create reflection instead. The same criticism that once destroyed confidence now becomes information that may or may not deserve attention. The same emotional pressure that once forced immediate compliance no longer works because the person has learned to remain emotionally steady. This change often confuses those who relied on predictable emotional reactions. They repeat the same behaviors expecting the same results, only to discover that nothing happens. The guilt no longer creates surrender. The fear no longer creates obedience. The pressure no longer creates people-pleasing. Suddenly, the relationship operates under completely different rules. Respect gradually replaces control because control only survives where emotional instability exists. Once someone becomes emotionally grounded, manipulation loses its foundation. This new stability naturally leads to another lesson that changes relationships forever. They finally understand that loving someone does not require giving them unlimited access to every part of their life. Many caring individuals once believed love meant constant availability. If someone needed them, they answered immediately. If someone wanted another chance, they gave it. If someone crossed a boundary, they overlooked it, because preserving the relationship seemed more important than protecting themselves. Over time, experience teaches something entirely different. Love and access are not the same thing. A person can genuinely care about someone while also protecting their peace. A person can forgive without reopening every closed door. A person can wish someone well without inviting them back into spaces where they repeatedly created pain. Healthy boundaries are often misunderstood because they appear restrictive from the outside. In reality, boundaries do not exist to push people away. They exist to identify who can safely come closer. They are not walls built from bitterness. They are filters built from wisdom. Every healthy relationship has boundaries, whether spoken or unspoken. Respect for time, honesty, privacy, and emotional safety all depend upon healthy limits. The transformed person understands this deeply. They still care about people. Their compassion has not disappeared. Their kindness has not vanished. What has changed is the way access is given. Access is no longer automatic simply because someone has known them for years. Time alone no longer earns unlimited trust. History alone no longer guarantees closeness. Consistency becomes the new requirement. Respect becomes the new invitation. Reliable actions become more meaningful than familiar words. This often surprises people who believed past relationships guaranteed permanent emotional access. They expect old privileges to remain unchanged, even though their behavior never changed with them. The transformed person quietly refuses to confuse familiarity with trust, and that single decision completely reshapes every relationship in their life. As healthier boundaries become part of everyday life, another beautiful change begins to appear. Their energy starts matching the effort they receive from others. This may sound simple, but it represents one of the biggest psychological shifts a person can experience. For years, they believed love meant giving without measuring. They initiated every conversation, planned every meeting, remembered every important date, solved every misunderstanding, offered encouragement without expecting any in return. They carried relationships through effort that was rarely noticed because it had become normal. Eventually, they realized something important. Healthy relationships are built on reciprocity, not emotional exhaustion. Both people contribute, both people invest, both people show care through consistent action. From that point forward, they stop chasing connections that only survive through one-sided effort. They become observers instead of pursuers. They notice who reaches out without reminders. They notice who remembers important moments without being asked. They notice who supports them when life becomes difficult, instead of only appearing when they need something on. Their emotional investment becomes balanced rather than limitless. This feels unusual to people who once received endless attention without giving much back. Suddenly, they are expected to contribute equally. Instead of unlimited emotional labor, they experience mutual responsibility. Many interpret this fairness as rejection because they became accustomed to imbalance. Psychology explains that people quickly adapt to unequal benefits, making equality feel like loss, even when it is completely healthy. The transformed person understands this difference. They no longer mistake overgiving for love. They no longer confuse exhaustion with loyalty. Their relationships become fewer, but they become stronger because they are built upon shared effort, instead of one person carrying everyone else. By this stage, something even deeper has happened beneath the surface. The person others once believed they knew no longer exists in the same way. Identity is not fixed. Every meaningful experience changes it. Every painful lesson reshapes it. Every difficult season removes old beliefs and replaces them with new understanding. Growth changes personality in subtle ways. Pain changes standards that once seemed impossible to change. Experience changes expectations about what healthy relationships should look like. Yet many people continue interacting with someone based on memories instead of reality. They remember the version who never said no, the version who tolerated disrespect, the version who accepted excuses, the version who stayed no matter what happened. They expect that version to return because it is the only version they truly understood. What they fail to recognize is that growth has already rewritten that person's identity. The old habits disappeared because the lessons remained. The old fears disappeared because confidence replaced them. The old need for constant approval disappeared because self-respect became stronger. Returning to the past would require forgetting everything life has taught them, and genuine growth never works that way. This explains why attempts to reconnect sometimes fail even when both people want things to improve. One person is trying to rebuild yesterday while the other has already become someone shaped by everything yesterday taught them. They are searching for a familiar version that no longer exists. What stands before them is someone wiser, calmer, stronger, and far less willing to abandon themselves simply to keep someone else comfortable. And with every step forward, that new identity becomes even more deeply rooted, preparing the way for the final and most important lesson of this entire journey. The greatest transformations in life rarely arrive with dramatic announcements. They happen in silence, They happen through countless small decisions that no one else notices. One boundary that is finally respected. One disappointment that becomes the last one. One lesson that changes the way you see yourself forever. Over time, these quiet moments create a completely different person. Not someone who loves less, but someone who loves more wisely. Not someone who has become cold, but someone who has learned that kindness, without boundaries, often invites disrespect instead of appreciation. This is the true meaning of becoming unreachable. It is not about building walls around your heart. It is about protecting the peace that took years to find. The person who once waited for everyone to change eventually realizes that the only life they can truly change is their own. They stop asking for permission to be respected. They stop chasing people who repeatedly choose distance over understanding. They stop proving their value to those who never intended to recognize it. Instead, they quietly build a life where their happiness no longer depends on someone else's approval, attention, or inconsistent behavior. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is this: the people who took your patience for granted often believe they can return whenever they choose. They assume your forgiveness will always be waiting because it always has been before. But growth changes that belief forever. Once someone learns the value of their own peace, they no longer leave the door open for the same patterns that once caused them pain. They still wish others well. They still carry compassion, but they also carry wisdom. And wisdom knows that protecting your heart is not selfish. It is necessary. The greatest surprise for those who underestimated you is not that you walked away. It is realizing they can no longer reach the version of you they once controlled, influenced, or took for granted. They are searching for someone who no longer exists because experience has created someone stronger, calmer, and impossible to manipulate in the old ways. If there is one message to remember from today's journey, let it be this: your value has never been determined by how many people choose you, understand you, or approve of you. Your value has always existed. The difference is that now you finally see it for yourself. And once a person truly recognizes their own worth, they stop begging the world to recognize it too. That is where real freedom begins. That is where lasting confidence grows. And that is where peace becomes stronger than the need to be accepted by everyone. If this video spoke to you, let us know in the comments. What was the lesson that changed your life the most? Your story could encourage someone else who is quietly going through the same journey right now. If you enjoyed this deep dive into psychology, emotional intelligence, and personal growth, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. And if you believe someone in your life needs to hear this message, share this video with them today. You never know whose perspective it might change. Thank you for watching, for being part of this community, and for spending your time with us. Until our next video, continue protecting your peace, trust your growth, and remember this: the strongest version of you is not the one everyone can reach. It is the one that finally knows when, where, and with whom your heart truly belongs.